The German Shepherd struck the emergency room doors with both front paws, slid on the rain-slicked tile, and turned back toward the darkness as if the people inside were failing to understand the only message that mattered. Someone was still out there. His black and tan coat was soaked to the skin. A length of torn leather dragged from his collar. Blood darkened one paw, but the dog did not look at the injury. He stared through the glass at Nurse Emily Carter, ears high, chest heaving, then ran 3 steps toward the ambulance bay and looked back again. Emily had worked enough night shifts at Jefferson Military Medical Center to know panic when she saw it. This was not panic. It was purpose. Before we continue, tell us which city or state you are listening from. And if you believe loyalty should be honored long after the uniform comes off, share that thought in the comments and subscribe for more stories about courage, compassion, and the extraordinary bond between people and K9S. At 11:43 that November night, Jefferson was caught between a coastal storm and a staffing shortage. Rain hammered the roof of the military hospital outside Norfolk, Virginia. 2 ambulances waited under the covered drive. A helicopter had been grounded by wind. Every available nurse was moving, and every empty bed already had a name attached to it. Emily had just finished stabilizing a young sailor with a severe asthma attack when she heard the first impact against the doors. The security officer at the desk rose halfway from his chair. Animal outside. The dog hit the glass again, then swung his head toward the parking lot. Emily pushed through the doors before anyone could stop her. Cold rain struck her face. The German Shepherd immediately moved, not running away, but pacing his speed to hers. He crossed the ambulance lane, slipped between 2 parked vehicles, and stopped beside a gray pickup near the far curb. An older man lay on the pavement. One hand was trapped beneath him. The other remained curled around a broken leash. His silver hair was plastered to his forehead, and his lips had begun to lose color. Emily dropped to her knees. "Sir, can you hear me?" "No." Response. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. A pulse was there, thin and irregular. "Get a stretcher," she shouted. The German Shepherd stood over the man's legs, trembling but silent. When security officer Luis Ortega approached, the dog shifted sideways, placing his body between the stranger and the fallen man. Emily raised one hand. "Slowly. Let him see you." Luis stopped, lowered his shoulders, and let Emily guide the dog back by the collar. The worn brass tag read Atlas. Beneath the name was a faded military working dog identification number. The response team arrived. Emily gave orders while rain streamed down her face. They lifted the man, attached monitors, and rushed him toward the doors. Atlas moved with them until an administrator blocked the entrance. "No animals inside the emergency department," the man said. Atlas watched the stretcher disappear. His ears flattened. He pulled once against Emily's grip, then planted all 4 paws and refused to leave. Emily looked through the doors at the older man whose heart rhythm was collapsing on the monitor. Then she looked down at Atlas, rain running from his muzzle. "He brought us to him," she said. The administrator shook his head. "Call animal control." Atlas gave one low sound from deep in his chest. It was not a threat. It was the sound of a working dog being separated from the person he had been trying to protect. Emily took off her jacket and laid it over his shoulders. "Not tonight," she said. That decision would save Atlas's life. It would also cost Emily the career she had spent 11 years building. Inside Trauma Room 3, the older man's name was found on a weathered wallet card. Marcus Hale, age 68, retired Navy Chief Petty Officer. His blood pressure fell despite medication. Dr. Priya Shah called for imaging, then for a surgical consult. Emily moved between the room and the ambulance entrance, carrying information in both directions because Atlas refused to leave the doors. Every time the stretcher wheels passed in the hallway, he stood. Every time they moved away, he sat again. Luis found a canvas awning and secured it beside the wall to shield him from the rain. He brought water. In a paper bowl. Atlas sniffed it, but did not drink. His attention never left the hospital. "Trained dog," Luis said. Emily knelt beside Atlas and examined the injured paw. A strip of metal had cut the pad, probably when he forced his way beneath the parking gate. The wound was not deep, but it needed cleaning. "Retired military dog," Emily said, turning the tag toward the light. "Maybe bomb detection. Maybe patrol. Then where is his handler?" Emily glanced through the doors. Luis exhaled. "Right. At 12:30, A hospital operations manager named Victor Lyle arrived with a tablet and a raincoat that had not yet been wet. He did not look at Atlas first. He looked at the growing group of staff near an unauthorized animal. "This entrance cannot become a holding area," Victor said. "County services can collect him." "The county shelter is closed," Luis replied. "They will send an overnight contractor." Victor tapped the screen. "That is the approved process." Emily knew what approved process meant at that hour. Atlas would be loaded into a steel compartment by a person who did not know him, taken to a loud municipal kennel, and held until someone identified his legal owner. Marcus might survive. He might not. Either way, the dog would spend the night believing the man he followed had vanished. "He is injured," Emily said. "Then the contractor can take him to the emergency veterinary clinic. The bridge is closing because of flooding." Victor's expression did not change. "Nurse Carter, your assignment is inside. My patient is inside." She looked down at Atlas. "The reason he is alive is standing out here." Victor stepped closer. "This hospital treats human patients. We are not licensed as a veterinary facility." Emily understood the rule. She also understood the difference between practicing veterinary medicine and cleaning a cut paw while a dog waited in freezing rain. She led Atlas into the small, enclosed family consultation room beside the ambulance bay. It was separated from clinical care areas by 2 sets of doors. Luis placed a sign outside. Emily used saline, gauze, and a bandage from the security first aid kit, not hospital treatment stock. Atlas watched every movement. When the cloth touched the torn pad, his muscles tightened, but he did not pull away. "You have done this before," Emily whispered. Atlas's breathing slowed beneath her hand. Victor appeared in the doorway. "You were told to wait for authorized transport." "I am waiting," Emily said. "He is waiting inside. You are creating a liability. He prevented a death in our parking lot." Victor looked toward the emergency department, where Marcus Hale was being rushed to surgery. "That does not change policy." "No," Emily said. "It changes what the policy is being applied to." For 3 seconds, neither moved. Then Victor said, "Document every item you used and report to Director Hayes at 7 in the morning." He walked away. Luis leaned against the wall. That sounded bad. Emily tied the final knot in the bandage. It sounded like 7 in the morning. Atlas lowered himself at last, but he faced the door. Near 2 o'clock, Dr. Shaw came into the consultation room. She removed her cap and sat across from Emily. Her eyes gave the answer before she spoke. Marcus had suffered a ruptured aortic aneurysm. The surgical team had done everything possible. He died 12 minutes after entering the operating room. Emily looked at Atlas. The dog stood before Dr. Shaw finished the sentence. He moved to the closed door and pressed his nose against the seam. "Does he have family?" Emily asked. "Emergency contact is disconnected. We found an estate attorney's card, but nobody is answering." Dr. Shaw watched Atlas. "He brought Marcus here." "Yes. And now he has no idea why Marcus is not coming back." Atlas remained at the door, motionless except for the rise and fall of his ribs. Emily had seen grief arrive in many forms. A mother folding her child's jacket. A sailor staring at a wedding ring in his palm. A physician standing alone after telling a family there was nothing more to do. Atlas could not ask the question, but every line of his body carried it. Where did he go? Emily sat on the floor beside him until dawn. She did not touch him at first. She simply stayed. After nearly an hour, Atlas shifted his weight and leaned the smallest part of his shoulder against her arm. That was when Emily noticed a second tag hidden beneath his collar. It was a flat piece of black metal scratched nearly smooth. On one side were the letters Trident 9. On the other were 6 names. One name had been marked with a tiny star. J. Reynolds. Emily did not know who he was. She did not know that 5 men on that tag were still alive because Atlas had refused an order years earlier. She did not know that the 6th man had spent every anniversary of that mission wondering where the dog had gone after retirement. She only knew Atlas had lost his person. So when Victor returned at 5:30 with a county transport order, Emily stood between him and the dog. "He stays until we find someone from his unit," she said. Victor's jaw tightened. "That is no longer your decision." Atlas rose behind her, silent and watchful. Emily felt the weight of his presence at her back. "No," she said. "It is my responsibility." By 7:15, Richard Hayes had read the incident report twice. He was not the cold man hospital gossip made him out to be. At 54, Richard had spent most of his career in emergency medicine before a damaged nerve in his right hand ended his work as a surgeon. Administration had not been his dream. It had been the only way he knew to remain useful inside the world he had trained his whole life to serve. That history made him careful. Jefferson had survived a federal review the previous year after a staff member used hospital equipment outside authorized care. Nobody had been hurt, but the hospital nearly lost funding for a rehabilitation program that served hundreds of injured veterans. Richard now saw every exception as a door that might not close again. Emily saw the people standing on the other side of those doors. She sat across from him in damp scrubs, her hair still tied back from the night shift. Victor Lal stood near the window, a human resources representative joined by video. Richard folded his hands. You were given a direct instruction. I was asked to send an injured military K-9 into a flooded city with an unknown contractor. You were told to follow the animal control procedure. The procedure did not account for the bridge closure, his injury, or the death of his owner. Victor interrupted. You also brought him into a controlled hospital area, a non-clinical family room with an exterior entrance. You used supplies. Security supplies. I logged them. Richard looked at her. This is not the first time you have bypassed a chain of command. Emily knew he would say it. 6 months earlier, she had moved an unidentified homeless veteran into an observation bed before registration cleared his eligibility. The man had been in septic shock. He lived. Emily received a formal warning. I would make that decision again, she said. That is the problem. Richard's answer was quiet, not angry. It hurt more because of that. Emily glanced through the glass wall toward the corridor. Atlas lay beside Louise, head raised, watching the office door. Richard followed her gaze. I appreciate what the dog did for Chief Hale. I do. But this hospital cannot operate on individual judgment whenever policy feels inconvenient. Compassion is not convenience. No, but compassion without boundaries can put an entire institution at risk. Emily leaned forward. Then fix the boundary. Do not punish the life that fell outside it. For the first time, Richard's expression changed. He looked tired. We have contacted the estate attorney, he said. Until ownership is established, Atlas will be placed at Tidewater County Animal Services. They have agreed to keep him in a quiet kennel. Emily looked toward Atlas again. His bandaged paw rested in front of him. His eyes stayed fixed on her. Give me 24 hours to find his military records. Victor shook his head. Denied. Richard hesitated, then signed the transfer form. Atlas was scheduled to leave at 8:30. He never made it to the transport van. At 8:12, Louise called Emily from the consultation room. Atlas had begun pacing in a tight circle. He swallowed repeatedly, stretched his neck, and tried to vomit without bringing anything up. His abdomen looked larger than it had an hour earlier. Emily's exhaustion vanished. She had volunteered at a military veterinary clinic during nursing school, mostly cleaning cages and carrying supplies. One emergency had stayed with her, a deep-chested working dog with gastric dilatation and volvulus bloat. The stomach could fill and twist, cutting off blood supply. Without surgery, a dog could die within hours. Do not let him walk, she told Louise. Call Harbor Emergency Veterinary and the Naval Station veterinary officer. Tell them suspected torsion. Victor entered behind her. The transport is here. He cannot go to the county shelter. The contractor can redirect. The contractor is not an emergency ambulance. Atlas tried to stand, stumbled, and dropped to his elbows. His gums were pale. Emily knelt without touching his abdomen. Atlas. Easy. His eyes found hers. His breathing came fast and shallow. The emergency veterinary clinic answered, but flooding had closed the direct route. Estimated travel time was more than an hour. The naval veterinary officer, Captain Hannah Cole, was on base but could not cross a security gate until a fallen tree was cleared. Richard arrived as Emily was relaying signs over the phone. Captain Cole's voice came through the speaker. Keep him still. No food or water. If you have oxygen, give it by mask without pressure. He needs transport the moment a route opens. Victor looked at Richard. We cannot administer hospital oxygen to an animal. Atlas's hind legs slid sideways. Emily reached for the portable oxygen cylinder mounted beside the emergency wheelchair. Richard caught her wrist. Do not do this, he said. She looked at his hand, then at his face. He has minutes before shock gets worse. You are not a veterinarian. I am not performing surgery. I am following a military veterinarian's direction. Through an unauthorized telephone consultation. Captain Cole heard him. Director Hayes, this is Captain Hannah Cole, United States Army Veterinary Corps. That dog is showing classic signs of gastric torsion. Oxygen and minimal movement may keep him alive long enough to reach my operating room. Richard's grip loosened, but he did not step away. Victor said, the liability is unacceptable. Emily pulled the cylinder free. Richard closed his eyes for one brief second. Then he released her. Emily placed the clear mask near Atlas's muzzle, allowing oxygen to flow without sealing it tightly. Louise dimmed the room. Emily kept her voice low. Atlas's gaze moved from the mask to her face. When pain tightened his body, his claws scraped once against the floor. He did not snap. He did not struggle. He stayed where she asked him to stay. Outside, the storm pressed against the doors. Inside, minutes became something physical. Captain Cole remained on the phone. She instructed Emily to monitor breathing, gum color, and consciousness. Dr. Shaw quietly brought a human cardiac monitor, but stopped before attaching it. Even she understood the line they were standing on. At 8:37, base security cleared the fallen tree. Captain Cole arrived in a military veterinary response vehicle with 2 technicians. They loaded Atlas onto a low stretcher. As they rolled him through the doors, Atlas lifted his head and searched the room. Emily stepped beside him. His nose touched her wrist. Then the doors closed. Surgery began 31 minutes later. Atlas's stomach had rotated nearly 180 degrees. Captain Cole decompressed it, restored circulation, and removed a small section of damaged tissue. She later told Emily that 10 more minutes might have changed the outcome. Victor called it unauthorized use of medical property. Richard called it insubordination after a final warning. Emily called it the only decision she could live with. At 4 that afternoon, after being awake for more than 30 hours, she returned to Richard's office. The termination letter lay between them. Richard did not slide it toward her immediately. I argued for suspension, he said. The board counsel rejected it. Emily looked at the signature line. His name was already there. You signed. I am responsible for this hospital. And I was responsible for what was in front of me. I know. The honesty in his voice almost broke her composure. Richard pushed the letter across the desk. Effective immediately. Emily removed her identification badge. The plastic card had been with her through hurricanes, mass casualty drills, double shifts, and the night her own father died in a room 2 floors above them. She placed it beside the letter. Victor waited near the door to escort her out. Emily stood. Did Atlas survive? Richard looked toward the window. The veterinary clinic says he is stable. Her shoulders lowered. That is all I needed to know. She walked through the emergency department carrying a cardboard box with 1 spare pair of shoes, a coffee mug, and a photograph of her father in Navy corpsman dress blues. Conversation stopped. Dr. Shaw started toward her, but Emily shook her head. She could not manage sympathy yet. Outside, the rain had weakened to a cold mist. Louise stood beneath the awning. I am sorry. Emily hugged the box to her chest. Do not be. You helped me keep him calm. They should not be doing this. Richard is afraid of losing the hospital. And you lost your job. Emily looked toward the road leading to the naval station. Atlas did not lose his life. She walked to her car without looking back. 2 days later, Atlas woke fully from surgery. Captain Cole opened the kennel door and sat on the floor several feet away. Atlas wore a soft recovery collar. A line ran into his foreleg. His abdomen was bandaged. He lifted his head when footsteps passed, but each time the person moved on, his ears lowered again. Captain Cole tried Marcus Hale's old commands. Atlas obeyed, but without energy. He ate only a few bites. At night, he faced the door. On the 3rd morning, Emily arrived at the military veterinary clinic wearing jeans and her father's old rain jacket. She had no employee badge, no hospital schedule, and no clear idea what her life looked like beyond the next hour. Atlas heard her voice before he saw her. His head came up. His ears rose. When Captain Cole opened the inner door, Atlas tried to stand too quickly. The heart monitor accelerated. Emily dropped to her knees. Stay? Easy, Atlas. He froze, breathing hard, then lowered himself carefully. His tail struck the blanket once. Emily sat outside the kennel and placed her hand flat against the bars. Atlas moved until his muzzle rested over her fingers. Captain Cole watched from the doorway. He has been waiting for you. Emily looked down. I think he has been. waiting for everyone. Chief Hale's attorney located a will. Marcus left Atlas to a non-profit retired working dog sanctuary in North Carolina. They can take him after recovery. The words should have brought relief. Instead, Atlas pressed closer to the bars. Does the sanctuary know his unit? Emily asked. Only that he served with Naval Special Warfare. Most of his operational record is restricted. Emily removed the photograph she had taken of the black metal tag. What about Trident 9? Captain Cole studied it. Could be a team nickname. Could be a training class. The names may help. One name had already begun moving through channels neither woman could see. J. Reynolds. That afternoon, a former Navy dog handler in San Diego received the photograph from Captain Cole. He recognized the tag and forwarded it to a retired Master Chief in Coronado. The Master Chief called a number he had not used in years. Commander Jack Reynolds answered on the fourth ring. Jack, the Master Chief said, I think we found Atlas. Jack did not speak. On the wall of his workshop in Montana hung a photograph of 6 Navy SEALs kneeling beside a young German shepherd. The men were covered in dust. Atlas sat in the center, alert and steady, one front paw resting on Jack's boot. Jack looked at that photograph every morning. He had spent 7 years believing Atlas was living out retirement with Marcus Hale on the Virginia coast. Marcus had stopped answering messages months earlier. Jack had assumed the old chief wanted privacy. Now he listened as the Master Chief explained the parking lot, Marcus's death, the emergency surgery, and the nurse who had been fired after keeping Atlas alive. Jack sat down slowly. What is her name? Emily Carter. Jack repeated it once. Then he asked the question that changed the direction of every life connected to the story. Who fired her? Jack Reynolds had spent most of his adult life learning how to act before fear could take control. He knew how to enter a room without wasting movement, how to make decisions when information was incomplete, and how to carry responsibility without showing its weight. The call about Atlas reached beneath all of that training. Jack called the other men from Trident 9. None of the surviving men hesitated. Most of all, they remembered a night in a mountain village when Atlas had refused to follow Jack through a narrow stone passage. The team had been moving toward a suspected weapons storage site. Their intelligence said the passage was clear. Atlas stopped at the entrance, body low, nostrils working. Jack gave the hand signal to advance. Atlas did not move. Jack repeated it. The dog backed into his leg, then turned and pulled toward a different route. It was the only time Atlas had openly resisted him. Jack trusted him. Minutes later, a second team found pressure wires hidden beneath loose soil in the passage. The narrow corridor had been prepared to collapse inward. 5 men from Trident 9 would have entered together. Atlas had caught the chemical trace and the disturbed stone before any instrument did. He saved their lives without understanding metals, headlines, or the years those men would later spend raising children, building homes, and trying to become ordinary again. Now Marcus was dead, Atlas was recovering from surgery, and a nurse named Emily Carter had been removed from the hospital for refusing to let him die. Jack did not feel anger first. He felt shame. A stranger had kept a promise that belonged to all of them. He booked the first flight to Virginia. Emily knew none of this when she returned to the veterinary clinic the next morning. She brought boiled chicken approved by Captain Cole and a folded blanket that had belonged to her father. Atlas sniffed the blanket for a long time before circling carefully and lying down on it. Captain Cole watched his breathing. That is the most relaxed he has been. He likes Old Navy laundry, Emily said. Maybe he likes things that smell like you. Emily looked away. The idea felt too large to accept. Her phone buzzed with another missed call from a hospital number. She let it go to voicemail. You should answer, Captain Cole said. They have my badge. There is nothing else to say. Dr. Shaw called me last night. Half the emergency department signed a letter asking for a review. Emily adjusted the edge of Atlas's blanket. They need to keep their jobs. They also need to live with themselves. Her mortgage payment was due in 12 days. Her health insurance would end at the close of the month. 3 hospitals had already asked why she left Jefferson. She had not decided how to answer without sounding either ashamed or defiant. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with her father's photograph beside the termination letter. Senior Chief Hospital Corpsman Daniel Carter had taught her that rules mattered because lives depended on consistency. He had also taught her that a checklist could never replace attention. Across town, Atlas stopped eating again. Captain Cole called at 9:20. His vitals are stable, but he is restless. He keeps going to the door. Emily was already reaching for her keys. When she arrived, Atlas was standing inside the kennel despite the strain on his incision. He looked past Captain Cole and fixed on Emily. She entered slowly and sat beside his blanket. "You are supposed to be resting." Atlas lowered himself with a soft exhale. His head settled across her ankle. Captain Cole crouched outside the kennel. "The sanctuary transport is scheduled for Friday." Emily's hand stopped over Atlas's shoulder. "Friday. They are good people. Quiet property. Experienced staff. I know. You can apply to adopt him once the estate transfer is complete." Emily gave a small, humorless laugh. "I just lost my job. I have never owned a working dog. He needs someone who understands his history." Atlas's ear moved at the change in her voice. Captain Cole looked at the dog and then at Emily. Maybe understanding where he has been is not the same as understanding what he needs now. On Friday morning, the sanctuary van arrived beneath a bright sky washed clean by the storm. Atlas walked carefully on a short lead. His bandage had been reduced, and the incision was healing. He obeyed Captain Cole's commands, but his eyes searched the parking area. Emily had told herself she would not come. Goodbyes did not become easier by watching the door close. At the last minute, she drove to the clinic. Atlas saw her car before she parked. He stopped. "The sanctuary." Handler encouraged him forward. Atlas took one step, then turned his body sideways and lowered himself to the pavement. "Atlas," Captain Cole said gently. "Up." He remained down. Emily approached without speaking. Atlas's tail moved once against the ground. When she reached him, he rose and pressed his shoulder against her legs. The handler smiled sadly. "He has made a preference clear." Emily knelt and held the sides of his neck, careful of the collar. "You are going somewhere safe." Atlas watched her face. "People will know how to care for you." He lifted one paw and placed it on her knee. Emily closed her eyes. A black sport utility vehicle entered the lot and stopped near the clinic doors. Jack Reynolds stepped out before the engine shut off. He was 51, broad-shouldered, with silver at his temples and a slow, deliberate way of moving that kept Atlas from feeling crowded. Jack stopped 20 feet away. The German shepherd's paw slid from Emily's knee. His head turned. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Atlas inhaled. His ears rose. The years seemed to leave his posture. He moved one step, then another, faster each time until the lead pulled tight. Captain Cole released it. Atlas crossed the pavement with a broken run, limited by healing muscles, but driven by recognition. Jack dropped to one knee. "There you are," he said. Atlas reached him and pushed his muzzle beneath Jack's arm. A sound came from the dog that Emily had never heard, part breath, part whine, held low as if too much emotion had nowhere else to go. Jack bowed his head over Atlas's neck. For a long moment, the parking lot remained silent. When Jack finally looked up, his eyes were wet. He saw Emily standing beside the van. "You are Emily Carter." She nodded. Jack rose with one hand still on Atlas. "I have been trying to find the right words since Montana. You do not owe me anything." "Yes," he said. "I do." Atlas moved between them, looking first at Jack, then at Emily. His body relaxed in a way it had not since Marcus died. Jack noticed. "He trusts you. I stayed with him." "That is what trust is." Jack introduced himself and explained Trident 9, Marcus, and the old tag. Emily listened as the man described the passage Atlas refused to enter and the 5 lives that continued because of that refusal. She looked down at the aging dog. Atlas stood quietly, one paw bandaged, gray hair around his muzzle, his attention divided between 2 people from different chapters of his life. "He saved all of you." "More than once." Jack's voice tightened. "Then I let years pass because I believed someone else was watching him. Marcus loved him. I know. This is not Marcus's failure." Jack looked toward the sanctuary van. "It is mine." Emily shook her head. "Guilt will not help Atlas decide where home is." Jack studied her. "You sound like someone who has had practice saying that to herself." She did not answer. The sanctuary handler explained that the transfer could be postponed while ownership was reviewed. Marcus's will name the sanctuary, but it also gave the non-profit discretion to place Atlas with an approved former handler or guardian. Jack qualified immediately. Everyone expected him to take Atlas. Jack looked at the dog leaning against Emily's leg. "I came to bring him home," he said. "I may have been late enough to find out he already chose one." Emily's throat tightened. "I cannot promise him stability right now." You promised him something when stability mattered most. I do not have a job. You have 4 men arriving tomorrow who would trust you with their lives because he trusted you with his. That is not the same as knowing how to care for him. No, Jack said. But we can teach you what we know, and he can teach you the rest. Atlas lowered himself at Emily's feet and rested his head on her shoe. Captain Cole looked away to give her privacy. Emily ran one hand over the dog's neck. He still needs a quiet place, medical follow-up, structured exercise, and someone home during recovery. Jack smiled for the first time. You already know more than most people who claim to be ready. The decision was not made in a dramatic sentence. It came through practical questions. Food, medication, stairs, fencing, follow-up appointments. Jack offered to stay in Virginia during recovery. The sanctuary approved a 30-day foster placement with Emily while legal review continued. By sunset, Atlas was lying on Daniel Carter's old blanket in Emily's living room. He inspected every doorway before settling. He checked the kitchen, the hallway, and the back porch. When Emily moved from room to room, his eyes followed, but he did not crowd her. Jack sat at the table, writing a schedule from memory. At 6, he will expect movement, Jack said. Not because he needs a mission. Routine tells him the world is under control. Emily looked at Atlas. What happens when the world is not under control? Jack's pen stopped. He watches the people he trusts. Atlas lifted his head at the sound of Emily's voice. She felt the weight of that answer. The next morning, Owen, Miguel, Darius, and Ben arrived from 4 different states. They did not enter Emily's house as a formation or a spectacle. They came carrying dog food, an orthopedic bed, a repaired leather leash, and stories. Atlas greeted each man in turn. He moved slowly, sniffing hands, sleeves, and boots. With Owen, his tail swung wide. With Miguel, he pressed his forehead against the man's chest. Darius laughed through tears. Ben sat on the floor because his knees would not hold him. Emily watched Atlas restore something in each of them simply by remembering. Then the team turned to her. Owen said, "We heard you lost your job." Emily glanced at Jack. "I did not ask for help." "No," Darius said. Atlas did. They had already requested a formal meeting with Jefferson's governing board. They had submitted service records, letters from military veterinary officers, and statements about the emergency. Dr. Shah and 23 hospital employees added their names. Emily felt pressure rise in her chest. "I do not want this to become an attack on the hospital." Jack nodded. "Neither do we. Richard made the wrong decision, but he did not cause the policy gap. Then we address the gap. And if the board only wants a public relations solution?" Jack looked toward Atlas, who had returned to her side. "Then we make them look at the life behind the headline." The board scheduled a review for Monday morning. Monday arrived with a hard blue sky and wind. Moving off the Chesapeake, Emily dressed in the same navy suit she had worn to her father's memorial. Atlas watched from the bedroom doorway while she fastened the cuffs. His incision had healed enough for a short, controlled outing, and Captain Cole had cleared him to attend the review as long as he avoided stares and stress. "Those are 2 things hospitals are very good at providing," Emily said. Atlas tilted his head at her tone. Jack clipped the repaired leather leash to his collar. The brass name tag rested beside the black Trident 9 marker. Emily noticed that Jack had polished neither. The scratches belonged to Atlas's history. Jefferson's governing board met in the education wing, away from patient care. A row of windows overlooked the ambulance entrance where Atlas had first appeared in the rain. Staff members filled the back seats. Louise stood near the door in uniform. Dr. Shah sat beside Captain Cole. Victor Lyle arranged documents at the council table. Richard Hayes waited alone at the opposite end. When Emily entered with Atlas and the men of Trident 9, the room became still. Atlas did not react to the attention. He moved beside Emily at a measured pace, scanned the room once, and settled at her left foot. The board chair, Admiral Rebecca Sloan, retired, began without ceremony. This review concerns Nurse Emily Carter's termination, the emergency handling of retired military working dog Atlas, and the adequacy of current policy. Victor presented the hospital's position first. He did not insult Emily. He described risk, licensing boundaries, federal funding, infection control, and the danger of allowing employees to improvise outside authorized practice. Much of what he said was true. That made the issue harder, not easier. Richard spoke next. He explained the prior warning, the direct order, and the use of oxygen equipment. He also acknowledged that the hospital had no practical protocol for an injured working animal accompanying a critically ill patient after veterinary services closed. Did Nurse Carter's actions contribute to Atlas surviving? Admiral Sloan asked. Richard looked at Emily. Yes. Would strict compliance with existing procedure have delayed appropriate care? Yes. Then why was termination necessary? Richard's hand flexed once against the table, the injured fingers slower than the others. Because I believe protecting the institution required a clear response to repeated insubordination. Do you still believe that? He looked toward Atlas. I believe I confuse control with protection. A murmur moved through the room. Emily had prepared pages of testimony. She set them aside. When Atlas arrived, she said, he did not ask us to change what this hospital is. He reminded us what it is for. I am not asking anyone to ignore infection control, licensing, or accountability. I am asking the hospital to admit that our rules stopped at the exact place where a real emergency began. She described the storm, Marcus Hale's collapse, Atlas's injury, and the signs of gastric torsion. She described Captain Cole's instructions and the transport delay. She did not describe herself as heroic. I made a choice, she said. It had risk. Doing nothing also had risk. Only one of those risks was lying on the floor in front of me. Jack Reynolds stood after her. He placed the old team photograph on the document camera. 6 younger men appeared on the screen behind a sable German shepherd. This dog saved 5 members of my team when every piece of information available to us said the route was safe, Jack said. He did not save us because he disobeyed. He saved us because his training, senses, and judgment detected what the system missed. He looked at Emily. Nurse Carter did the same thing. Owen, Miguel, Darius, and Ben spoke briefly. They told the board what Atlas had given them, but they did not ask for revenge. They asked Jefferson to build a policy worthy of the people and animals it served. The board recessed before noon. Most people moved into the hall. Emily remained near the windows while Atlas drank from a collapsible bowl. Jack spoke quietly with Richard. Their posture was guarded, but not hostile. Atlas stopped drinking. His head lifted. At first, Emily thought he had heard something in the corridor. Then his nostrils moved. His ears angled toward a closed service door at the far end of the education wing. Atlas. He stood. The leash tightened as he moved toward the door. Jack turned immediately. What is it? Emily asked. Atlas lowered his head near the floor, inhaled, and backed away 1 step. Then he looked at Jack and gave a short, sharp bark. The sound transformed the former SEALs. Their conversation ended. Their attention narrowed. Jack approached the service door without opening it. Do you smell that? Emily caught it a second later. Hot plastic. Faint, bitter, almost hidden beneath the ventilation system. Luis called facilities from his radio. Before anyone answered, smoke curled from the lower hinge. Fire, he said. The alarm had not activated. Richard moved toward the wall pull station and triggered it. Bells sounded through the education wing. Doors released. Staff began guiding people toward the exit. A facilities technician arrived at a run. Battery storage is behind that corridor. Backup units were moved there after the storm. Anyone inside? Richard asked. Therapy rooms on the other side. They were supposed to be cleared for lunch. A pediatric occupational therapist pushed through the crowd, face pale. Noah Bennett was in sensory room 2. His mother went to get his medication. I thought another therapist had him. The education wing erupted into motion. Noah was 9 years old, recovering from injuries sustained in a vehicle accident. He could walk with braces, but not quickly. During loud alarms, he wore noise-reducing headphones and often sought small, quiet spaces. Luis tried the main therapy corridor. Smoke rolled beneath the door, thicker now. We need fire response. The hospital brigade was already coming, but the route through the central hall would take several minutes. Atlas pulled toward a side passage. His incision, Emily said. Jack looked at the dog. Atlas's body was tense, weight forward, eyes fixed on a child's blue backpack lying beside the therapist's chair. He moved to the backpack, sniffed the strap, then turned toward the side passage again. He has a scent, Jack said. You cannot send him in there, Victor said. Jack did not look away from Atlas. I am not sending him anywhere. Emily. Understood. Atlas had already decided. The side passage connected to a protected service hall behind the therapy rooms. Smoke was lighter there, but the alarm echoed against concrete walls. Jack wrapped a damp cloth loosely around Atlas's neck, not over his nose. Emily took a small emergency respirator from the wall cabinet. Miguel grabbed another. Richard stepped in front of them. "The fire team is coming." "Then keep this door open for them," Emily said. She expected him to order her back. Instead, Richard pulled the heavy fire door wide and braced it with his shoulder. 2 minutes. If conditions change, you turn around. Jack, Emily, and Atlas entered. The corridor lights flickered. Atlas stayed low and moved quickly without pulling hard enough to strain his abdomen. At the first intersection, he checked left, then right. Smoke drifted from the left. He chose right. They passed sensory room 1. Empty. At room 2, the door stood open. Cushions lay scattered inside, but Noah was not there. Emily's heart hammered beneath the respirator. "Noah." No answer. Atlas crossed the room, sniffed a weighted blanket, and moved toward a narrow interior door marked equipment. He scratched once. Jack opened it. Noah sat behind a stack of foam mats with his headphones over his ears. He had pulled his knees to his chest. The alarm lights flashed, but the thick walls muted the sound. Emily crouched. "Noah, my name is Emily. We need to leave." The boy stared at the mask covering part of her face and pressed farther back. Atlas lowered himself. Even with smoke entering the room, even with alarms and running footsteps beyond the wall, the German shepherd became still. His ears softened. His head rested on his front paws. Noah looked at him. Emily removed her respirator long enough to show her face. "Atlas found you." The boy's breathing slowed. "Is he a police dog?" "He is retired military." Atlas remained down, eyes on Noah. "Will he walk with me?" "Yes." Noah reached for the leather handle on Atlas's working harness. Jack had attached it for the review as part of the service record display. Emily hesitated, then let the boy hold it without pulling. Atlas rose carefully. They moved back through the sensory room. Jack carried Noah when the braces caught on a floor mat. Atlas stayed beside them, checking over his shoulder every few steps. At the service hall, smoke thickened suddenly. A battery unit ruptured behind the wall with a dull pop. The lights went out. Emily placed one hand on Atlas's back. "Find the door." The words came from trust, not command training she possessed. Atlas moved. His shoulders guided her through the darkness. Jack followed with Noah against his chest. A strip of emergency light appeared ahead. Richard was still holding the fire door, coughing but refusing to release it. They crossed the threshold seconds before the hospital brigade sealed the corridor. Noah's mother reached him in the hall and wrapped both arms around her son. The boy held on to Atlas's harness until Jack gently loosened his fingers. Firefighters contained the overheated battery bank before flames reached the therapy wing. Investigators later found that storm damage had disabled a smoke sensor inside the storage room. Atlas detected the heated casing before the system did. Again, he had found what people and equipment had missed. Outside beneath the clear afternoon sky, Emily sat on the curb while Captain Cole examined Atlas. His incision remained closed. One paw pad was irritated, but he had suffered no serious injury. Noah approached with his mother. He carried the blue backpack against his chest. "Can I thank him?" Emily nodded. Noah held out his hand. Atlas sniffed it, then placed his chin briefly against the boy's wrist. The child smiled. Across the ambulance lane, Richard watched them. Soot marked one sleeve of his suit. His injured hand trembled from holding the fire door, but he did not hide it. He walked to Emily. "The board reached a decision before the alarm," he said. She stood slowly. "They voted to reverse your termination and restore your position with full back pay." Emily looked toward the hospital, where smoke stains now marked one service window. "And the policy?" "A joint emergency protocol with the Naval Veterinary Clinic, military working dog program, security, and county services. Captain Cole has agreed to help write it, not just for decorated dogs." Richard nodded. "For any service animal or working animal accompanying a patient. And staff can provide basic stabilization under remote veterinary direction when delay creates immediate danger, if the medical and infection control teams approve the framework." Emily held his gaze. "That needs to be written, not promised." A tired smile touched his face. "You have not changed." "No, good." Richard extended the hand that still worked without pain. "Come back and help us change what should." Emily accepted it. She returned to Jefferson 2 weeks later, but not to the same job. The board appointed her clinical coordinator for emergency access and veteran family support, with protected authority to develop the new policy. She continued working nursing shifts because she refused to become someone who only discussed care in conference rooms. The program became known unofficially as the Atlas Protocol. It created a secure family room with washable surfaces and an exterior entrance. It established 24-hour contact with military and civilian veterinary partners. It trained security and emergency staff to recognize heat injury, bloat, shock, and safe handling without pretending nurses were veterinarians. It also required administrators to document not only the risk of action, but the risk of delay. Richard signed the final policy beside Emily. Atlas's 30-day foster placement became permanent. Jack had the legal right to claim him, but he signed the adoption recommendation himself. He remained listed as Atlas's secondary guardian, a promise that the dog would never again disappear between systems. The men of Trident 9 returned often. Owen repaired Emily's fence. Miguel taught her how to read Atlas's fatigue before the dog showed weakness. Darius brought his daughter, who sat on the porch reading aloud while Atlas slept. Ben replaced Marcus Hale's broken leash with a new one and mounted the old brass clasp in a wooden frame. Jack visited on the anniversary of the mountain passage. He and Emily placed 6 small stones beneath an oak tree in the yard, one for each name on the black tag. The stone for Eli Turner rested closest to the trunk. Atlas sniffed each stone, then lay beside them in the afternoon sun. He never became a pet in the careless sense of the word. He remained observant. He checked doors. He watched strangers until Emily welcomed them. Thunder sometimes brought him upright from sleep, ears searching for a command that no longer came. Emily learned not to tell him that nothing was wrong. Instead, she sat beside him until he saw that the room was safe. In return, Atlas learned her silences. On nights when memories of her father pressed too close, he left his bed and rested across the doorway until she slept. When she returned from a difficult shift, he met her with a slow sweep of his tail and followed her to the porch. He never asked her to explain what she had seen. He simply stayed. 1 year after the storm, Jefferson dedicated the secure family room to Marcus Hale. His photograph hung beside a smaller image of Atlas in his working harness. The plaque did not list missions or medals. It carried a sentence from Marcus's will. Loyalty is a debt best paid forward. At the dedication, Noah Bennett walked without braces. He knelt beside Atlas, now 10 years old and silver across the face. "You found me," Noah whispered. Atlas touched his nose to the boy's shoulder. Emily stood beside Jack near the back of the room. Richard joined them, his right hand resting in a brace after another surgery. "I used to believe institutions survived by preventing exceptions," he said. Emily watched Atlas accept a careful greeting from Noah's mother. Maybe they survived by learning from the right ones. That evening, Emily drove home with Atlas in the back seat. Autumn light moved across the Chesapeake marshes. At a red light, she looked at him through the mirror. He was asleep with his head on her father's old blanket. For most of his life, Atlas had awakened waiting for a task. Protect the team. Search the route. Watch the door. Find the person no one else could see. Now his breathing stayed deep as traffic moved around them. At home, Emily opened the front door. Atlas entered, checked the hallway from habit, then returned to stand beside her. She removed his collar and placed it on the table. Without the brass tag and the black metal marker, he looked smaller, older, and finally free from every title the world had given him. Emily sat on the porch step. Atlas lowered himself beside her, his shoulder against her knee. "You did enough," she said. His ears moved toward her voice. "You do not have to save anyone tonight." The yard settled into evening. Somewhere beyond the fence, children laughed. A screen door closed. Wind moved through the oak leaves above the 6 stones. Atlas placed one paw over Emily's shoe and closed his eyes. The dog who had saved soldiers, found a dying man in a storm, survived because a nurse broke the wrong rule, and led a child through smoke was no longer waiting for someone to remember him. He was home. And Emily, who had believed losing her badge meant losing the life she had built, finally understood what Atlas had been showing her from the first moment he struck those glass doors. A mission can end. A career can change. A system can fail. But loyalty does not disappear when circumstances take away its title. It turns back toward the person who stayed. It waits at the door. And when the path is dark, it leads them home together. What stayed with you most from Emily and Atlas's journey? Her decision to risk everything for one life, the soldiers who returned for their old partner, or the moment Atlas proved that loyalty never retires? Share your city or state and your thoughts in the comments. And subscribe for more cinematic K9 stories about courage, second chances, and the bonds that continue long after the final command.